Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Undone season finale. Finale, as in series finale, maybe? I don't know. I'm going into this thinking it's just a season finale. Either way, it was a great episode. A lot of really interesting things. So, let's break it down. So first and foremost, let's kind of pick up some of the conversations I had last episode where I was like, yeah, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because that last episode, I was like, yo, that penultimate episode, I was like, that seemed like that could be a finale too. And this episode, if it ended up being a finale, whatever the case may be, of this storyline we've gotten so far, it definitely felt like it could be almost an epilogue to the previous episode, rather than, like, it feels like that. Everything's a conclusion. Obviously, every episode is built upon itself, but it feels like this is more so an epilogue to that last episode. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and it seems like everything's good. The whole family's together. They're happy, and ultimately, what ends up happening, though, something's still not right, because she feels it somewhere inside of herself that something's not right, and she kind of looking at her mom. They're all dancing, having fun. Alma's looking at her mom, and she sees her mom the same way she did in, what was it, episode 1 or 2? I'd say it was probably episode 2 of the first season, where she saw her mom like rapidly aging and being born and dying, like that whole, like, going through her life like process, like all at once, like, within quick succession. She's seeing that again, and she just feels like, right. She even asks Becca's like, does things feel off to you? But Becca's like, no, everything's like perfect. Everything's great. It's like, come on, just trust it. Everything's okay. She's like, okay, I'm going to trust in it. And she ends up talking to Rosario later on, asking like, oh, like, did you open the door? And she's like, oh yeah, it ended up being my grandmom, like, had some like trauma, but that ended up getting resolved. She ended up healing, and that led to our entire family healing. So everything worked out in the end. And it's like, okay. But then she's like, is that all there was? Because Rosario picked up on there's actually something else there. And I almost like, wait, what? Which immediately I'm like, I'm curious, what could that be? What could be left behind the door? And I was like, well, it must be something Alma related, but what it ended up being isn't what I thought it would have been, But Alma ends up opening the door, and she sees different stuff. And I think it's like, right, she saw her grandmother as a little girl, and she saw her brother Alejandro as a little boy. And then also at the very end of it all, she saw herself back at the end of season 1 / at the beginning of this season in front of that cave, waiting for her dad to come out, whether or not it worked or not. And I thought that was so interesting. I think this episode did a beautiful job. I mean, it's timey-wiminess loop stuff of just kind of, it all kind of, not fully loopish, but, and I'm not even referencing the movie Loop. Not Looper is what I'm thinking of, but I'm not even referencing that. I'm just referencing a typical time loop. It's so interesting. It's like, okay, so we'd always go back to that. But it's not necessarily a time loop. It's more like starting back from point A, but not going through point B to point C like we have so far. Going from timeline A to timeline B to timeline C is about going back to timeline A and just staying there. We'll kind of break that down more as we're going through it. But once again, like, everything seems good. Everything seems great. Because even Alma's back to that elevator yet again this season. And she's like, well, press any button. It's like, why would I? My life is great. It's good here. And it's like, wait, is it really? And then she finds out that her dad had a stroke, and now he's paralyzed, and now she wants to fix it, but they ended up bringing in Rosario to kind of perform some, of some of her practices to see if it will work. Alma obviously wants to go back even more, but, Becca's like, right, maybe we shouldn't do that, because life is great the way it is. We don't want to tamper with it anymore. And that's also something her dad signs to her, because he's paralyzed, so he can't even, and paralyzed, and was it like the right side or something like that, so he can't even talk. But he signs to her that he's okay with things being as they are. He was able to get his mom healed, and now their entire family is healed. So once again, he is someone from, like Alma, he remembers timeline A. He remembers how bad things are. Becca might not remember timeline A where they lost their dad. She remembers timeline B where their family was kind of a mess, and things weren't great. And so ultimately, it is this conversation about, which I think is kind of the heart of this show to some extent, is always kind of like, can you finally let go? Alma has never been able to let go this entire season. Like, I'm going to fix my family. I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to make sure that everyone walks away happy, that dad stays around, but then dad's able to save his mom, as well as being able to help their mom, Camilla with the whole Alejandro situation, and that's the complicated thing of like, right, if you go back in time, there's a good chance you can screw this up. But almost like, no, I could go back in time. We can make sure that like everything works out. That like we could go back and maybe do this and do that to make sure that Dad doesn't have a stroke. But because like, how can you be so certain that if you do this and you do that, that it will help? And also like, we can't go back to a timeline where our brother isn't a part of our lives, especially having gotten to experience it. Not only, getting to experience having him in their lives in timeline, seeing the great things, the beautifulness that has become their family and everyone being happy. And even Alma describing it as like, in this timeline where we love each other and things aren't necessarily complicated. But they know what it was, where things were like before Alejandro in timeline B and what that meant for Camilla and everything. So they can't go forward. They can't go back. And at the end of the day, it's like, right, let's ask Dad. He must have a million ideas. Find out what he wants. And ultimately, he's like, when I was, after like his stroke, or maybe it was when he was sleeping, he saw his mom and he's signing that she's saying that I will join her soon. He's like, despite everything, I'm scared, but he's like, but I think I'm ready, because he got a second lease on life. And Alma blames herself because she's like, if I hadn't pushed you so much, all those times you try to save your mom, you drained yourself. And maybe that's why this is happening. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, maybe it's just meant to be. I mean, it's hard to say what is meant to be in this universe, but the fact is that he's just kind of telling her to let him go. And she wants to do more. And she even goes back in time to like the car crash, and she's talking to another version of herself, kind of having that conversation that Timeline A Alma had with Timeline A Jacob in that moment of time of like, right, we need to, about fixing things. And the question is like, can she, and does she want to change things? Is it up to her to change things? Especially now knowing, her sister's perspective on just kind of having to accept things as they are, because we got things as perfect as they are, and we're never going to have everything absolutely right. But we have such a beautiful thing now. Let's not break it, because we did change so much to get this good ending we're at right now. So why ruin that? And so Alma wakes up and her mom's calling and she knows what the call's about. But she sees a beautiful thing of her dad with his mom and her, Rutel with her parents too. Because, sadly, obviously she was very young when her parents died. So Jacob never really got to know them. Maybe this time around she talked about them a little bit more fondly instead of kind of burying all of that with all her trauma related to that, because she forgave herself, so she kind of finally became whole again. So maybe she shared a little bit more, but now he gets to spend time with his mom, and he's ready to let go, because now there's like, right, my entire family's good. I can move on now because I've corrected my mistakes. I've also made my families together. They're happy and more happier than they've ever been, and because he wanted to be there for his family, and he was able to do that, and he was able to be a part of that healing process in so many ways. And Alma, smiling when she sees her dad waving goodbye to her, and she's giving this speech, and I thought it was beautiful because it's like we see Camilla's mom is there, and I think her aunt, Camilla's sister too, showing that in this timeline, I guess she eventually opened up to her mom and let her mom know what's what, and to see that family entirely together again. Once again, maybe Camilla and her mom were in a better place, because last episode she was like, oh, I'm going to go stay with my mom. So I was under the impression her and her mom were never, I guess their relationship was never quite the same as it was before. It's complicated, but I think, once again, the healing process reached all the way around in more ways than one. So having Rosario there, having her own mother there, like you're seeing like just the full range of how much that healing took place, how much love was surrounded. And, Alma talks about, right, my dad, he made some mistakes, but he tried to always do what was right. And yes, he kind of did the wrong thing sometimes, but she's like, maybe life is, and just like talking about what her sister said about accepting her dad's death and finding a way to kind of move forward rather than always trying to move backwards. The fact of the matter is, because she's like, look at all the ties. She's like, maybe that's what life is all about, the ties and everything, because she's like, dad might be gone, but I still feel tied to him. And look at all the beautiful ties and connection we have. And it's like, maybe that's all life is all about. And I thought, I'm butchering it and I'm not phrasing it correctly. I thought it was such a beautiful speech that she had given. But now talking through those audio, I'm probably like mixing up the order of things, but now having a better understanding of seeing that other version of herself, she's like, right, this is what that Alma is me from timeline A. My consciousness of, hey, everything worked. I traveled to timeline B, but the version of me that's still there in timeline A waiting is still there. But, because of timey-wiminess, that version of me won't ever know that it worked because my consciousness time traveled to B and now I'm C, which is kind of like the best outcome timeline all around. Yes, it still comes with its struggles, but I love that it's like this entire journey going from timeline A to B to C has all been for the purpose of showing what could be, but also it was a journey of strength. It's not always the destination, it's the journey and how much you grow. It reminds me, there's a band I like called Everyone Dies in Utah. They're kind of a metalcore band. And they have a song called You Are Now Manually Breathing. There's a line in the song where it's like, I may walk slow, but I'll never walk backwards. Progress is not how much you know, it's how much of what you've learned has changed you. Those lines will always sit with me. And that's what Alma's journey has been. It's about how much of what she knows now has changed her because now she's in a position where like I am more equipped and more prepared to face the complications of like accepting the depths and the complications and not trying to rewind everything. So, because she and Becca looked in the bowl. Because initially she was like, right, that version of me isn't me. Like, why should I care about her future or whatever? I'm here now. That's all that should matter. And it's like, okay, but at the end of the day, regardless of its different versions of herself, that's still herself. It's very much like the Geraldine thing, the Ruko situation of her forgiving herself. It's almost kind of like that, like kind of coming together and healing. That Alma still needs healing. That's the thing that's been missing. That's what she's afraid of like, right, the fear of what if I actually am crazy? What if dad doesn't come back? Like, what if who she was back then, to her that was before all this worked out, that fear still lodged itself inside of her heart. That fear, that version of herself still existed there in timeline A, waiting to see if everything's going to be okay, whether everything's going to work out, whether her dad's going to come back. And so her and Becca see the future of what that looks like, and it looks dark. This is because that Alma like isn't prepared. She isn't fully equipped like this Alma is. We see like her mom and sister have her, in a facility, and she doesn't want to be bothered with anyone. She's cutting ties with them, and her mom notices like she's got cuts on her arms. Like, oh, you're hurting yourself again, and she's just like, leave me alone. She's not in a good place. And so Alma feels like she has to go back. But before that, she spends time with her family one more time looking at what she has. I thought it was beautiful what she said to her mom. It's like, oh, you look happy, Mom. She's like, yeah, I'm trying to... Losing your dad was rough, but, I'm grateful for what I have. She's like, yeah, I'm not talking just about that. I'm just talking about the entire life. You and Dad being in love, and Alejandro in your lives, and how happy you are, and just like how much love that spread to the rest of our family. She's like, if I've ever been mean to you sometimes in the past, Mom, I'm so sorry because I never knew what you were going through. Now she has a better understanding of everything. She knows what her mom's been dealing with this entire time, the sadness about Alejandro, and also like what you've sacrificed for us and the pain you were holding on to. Now she has a better understanding of her grandmother and everything that Geraldine Ruko was going through. She has more understanding. She's become more empathetic because I think because she was so fixated on what she was trying to fix in order, but once again, it was like a process of like, she healed with her father first, and then, found out her mother needed healing, but also his mother needed healing, and once again, healing her led this domino effect of everyone healing, and it was beautiful, and now she kind of has to say goodbye to this life, say goodbye to her sister. Now, I don't know timey-wimey-wise how this works out. Now, either that's suggesting like, hey, this timeline's going to disappear now, or it's going to be, hey, the Alma that's going to be in this timeline is like, cause she tells her sister, don't forget me, because she doesn't want her to go, but it's like, right, I have to. And it's like, don't forget me. I think that means like going, like when the timeline kind of snaps back into place, there's going to be the Alma of timeline C, not the Alma that went through everything in timeline A to timeline B to timeline B to timeline C. the version of her sister that she came to know that experienced all of that, Becca won't have that sister there anymore, which this whole journey has been something that brought them together in a way they've never been brought together before. They got to share, and the fact is that they together as siblings helped heal their family. They struggled forward and everything worked out. But also she won't have her sister, she'll still have her sister, but not the version of her sister she's come to spend this time with. So it's like, right, don't forget me. At least that's how I look at it. Like I said, I don't think this timeline's disappeared, but she goes back to the timeline A and she puts herself inside of her. It's her finally, taking all that she's gained from this experience. And so she talks to her mom, and her mom's like, we're going to get you help. She's like, okay, Mom. She doesn't fight it because she now knows everything her mom's going through. She has the knowledge of the alternate timeline, but she can't push it too much. So the question becomes then like, well, what do? You've already lost your dad, but you're learning to heal. So maybe you can get your mom to reach out to potentially Alejandro, because you can only assume she still had him in this timeline too. Because I guess not having Jacob around, she focused more so on Becca and Alma, and so I guess that gave her something to focus on rather than just like the Jacob situation of it all. I think maybe. But every time, like, Alma's driving with, there's even that whole Sam of it all. It's like, he's like, hey, sorry everything played out that way. He's like, maybe we could, if you want to, with no pressure, we could talk things out. She's like, okay. Because that's going to be interesting, too, because Sam wasn't a big part of her journey in Timeline B. She stopped off to see him, and she does care about him, but she's seen, like, right when he's not mixed up with everything else in her life. But I think her experiences and probably wanting her family to be happy and them healing, and maybe part of healing for her, it's like, right, maybe it's not necessarily Sam, but opening herself up to love in other capacities. Because even in Timeline C, she still didn't end up with anyone, but we really didn't go into the ins and outs of her dating life. So, and every time they're leaving the temple, and she keeps looking back, and Becca's like, right, do you want to go back? And she's like, no. It's like, did you see something? It's like, I thought I did, but no. It's just her, like, it's like the sad thing of, like, right, to make yourself whole again, and this journey was about, you couldn't leave this part of yourself behind, just like Geraldine couldn't leave Ruka behind. It's kind of similar in that regard, that she kind of had to sacrifice what she'd worked so hard for and to kind of leave it behind. But now, being whole now, and having the experiences and the strength to kind of keep pushing forward through these adversities, just like her grandmother did. I think in that same way, Alma kind of ended up healing herself. But now she's probably sitting there wondering, still questioning, like, but was that all real? Am I, I got all this knowledge now, but was that still all inside my head? Was that just some delusion, that my way of processing and handling things? Or is this really, I think maybe even then she's still kind of questioning herself to some extent. I still believe she knows, like, everything I went through was real, but there's probably still a part of her questioning, like, maybe it wasn't. Maybe I just think it was. This was just my brain's way of processing and coming to the conclusion of how I can help. But I think it's more so her looking at, like, right, this is the life I have to say goodbye to, because I'm walking away before I go on my journey to Timeline B, to Timeline C. So, because it's just her, because the timeline was about to rewrite itself, because what she did work, but she's making this Alma be okay with it not working. Because for this Alma, it didn't work, because I guess in a way it is still a loop, because Alma, her consciousness went to Timeline B, and then eventually went to C, but that version of herself comes back here. I guess I was right in that it was kind of a loop. It still was a loop in its own regard of everything plays in its part, because it's just like how in Timeline B, Timeline A Alma had to combine with Timeline B. I think it's kind of that same principle. Now she's coming back after everything to fuse back with Alma A after everything, because that's the Alma that was left in this timeline that would have had to go on living her life, which also makes you think, like, well, doesn't that also means Timeline B still existed too? Not less. I don't think that got erased. I think that timeline still kind of exists too, which is I think the kind of the thing of it. So I don't think those timelines ever really go away or disappear. I think it is just that they are still existing down their respective paths. I think that's at least what I'm pulling from it. So at the time of me recording this, which it is May 15th, so obviously Undone season 2 has been out for over going into its second week now, I believe this is it, because it's Saturday when I'm recording this. And this should be going up, all of the episodes should be going up tomorrow. But it's still unclear whether or not Amazon Prime is going to renew this or not. It's still relatively new enough that it's probably going to be a little while before we get any announcement. It is this interesting thing of the way it ends. It's one of those complicated things of, I kind of would want more, but at the same time I kind of wouldn't, because the story ends in a way that it's not like the happiest thing, but there is some closure and resolution to it in its own right. It's not like picture perfect, everything happy with a bow on it. And I think that is also just the aspect of like life, that, you know, things happen, and once again, just like the core value of like this journey taught Alma to have the strength to persevere, the resilience to keep going, to despite the hardships that happen in life, you just take life one step at a time and you find your way forward despite everything that you've gone through. So that lesson, I don't see that, would that become something that gets undone as Alma kind of lives in this world, or would they end things here? Because from what I was reading really quickly, it doesn't seem like there's anything definitive saying like, this is the end, or this is a series finale. There won't be a season 3. Nothing conclusive like that. There's room obviously open for a season 3, and we'd be spending time with Alma in this reality. And the question is, would she completely bury her abilities like Geraldine tried to, or would things start inking out? Like, I don't know. Because I'd be so curious, especially because we'd be probably just like season 1 to 2. Season 2 immediately picks up where season 1 left off. We could definitely see Alma trying to apply all this to help change her life and figure out where to go next. And once again, where her powers could come into play here. And once again, would there be a, you know, I figure with all this time traveling, you can't have all this without there being some sort of consequence. Plenty of time travel stuff has taught me that, so that's why I almost feel like there's got to be some, like, there can't just be some there's got to be some like backlash to, I mean, I guess maybe the price being that is paid, that she has to leave that life behind where everything kind of worked out after everything, and live in this reality where it didn't 100%, but still find that way forward, just because she can't leave this version of herself, this other part of herself in general, behind to suffer through. Without the knowledge, not necessarily knowledge, but the experience that will help find your way forward in that life, despite knowing what you know and stuff. I don't know. It's going to be interesting either way, whether the show gets another season or not. People did point out it probably will take a while, considering the nature of what the show is and how it's made. Like the mocapping and stuff like that, which I guess I never even thought about that. I don't know why I didn't cross my mind and think like this show was mocapped. I guess I just thought it was just like drawn, and just, animation in general takes a very long time. Plus this show also had to deal with the pandemic as well, because like the first season came out in 2019. We didn't get this season until 2022. So I'd assume the time frame will be a little bit different, just because like a lot of productions got shut down in 2020. So that probably buffered that even more. So some of the stuff was saying like we might not get it. If there is a season 3, probably won't be until 2024 when we get it, which is understandable. Once again, animation plus just the nature of what the show is, especially with the mocap element to it. Like I said, it didn't even cross my mind to think that this was mocap, but that does make a lot of sense. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm always curious when it comes to stuff like this. How do people feel? Do you want another season? Do you not? Do you think this ended perfectly, where you're like, yeah, it's not the happiest ending, but it's still an ending you're happy with, that you're like, I don't want them to have a season 3 where they might undo some of this. You feel like this isn't conclusive enough ending? Or do you, cause I feel like if they did a 3rd season, I definitely see that being like, maybe a 3rd and final season to kind of fully wrap everything up. And even how that would end, I wouldn't know. Like I said, I get the feeling like it could easily be a thing of realities falling apart, but, you know, they might not go that doom and gloom with it, but you never know. So do let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below about that. yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.